And we're live now, so
All right.
okay. Let's see. I need to think if I need to share this anywhere else.
I shared it on my Facebook pages, but
Yeah.
I guess Instagram and Twitter, you would have to.
Yeah, that would I would have to develop clips, and oh, we're already getting people popping in. Hello.
And only you can see that, right?
I believe you could see them as well, but if not, then I could have them pop up on here as well for
Okay.
you to see. So, hello everyone. We're just getting settled here. Let's see. Okay, a little bit of drink here. A little water. Okay, you ready to get started?
I'm ready, man. Let's do it.
Okay, in 3, 2, 1. And here we go. Hello, everyone. I'm Christopher D. Caston here with Thru Autistic Eyes podcast, where I'm simply an autistic adult just rediscovering the world. And here today with me is Garrett Brumfield from Roanoke, Virginia. He was born with cerebral palsy and has been facing it and overcoming obstacles since day one with it. So he graduated from Radford University in 2012 with a degree in media studies, and then eventually moved to working on his new motivational movement, Overcome Yours, in order to fulfill his calling as a speaker and disability rights advocate. And he's also collaborated with numerous local, state, and national organizations, including America Walks, the Partnership for People with Disabilities, Project for Public Spaces, the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities, and Walk to Connect, in an effort to improve healthcare, education, transportation, and public access for all people. And this is quite a long list I could read off of here. So,
No,
man.
Don't do that. Don't do that. No need for that. No need
Yeah,
for that.
so
Enough introduction as it is.
yeah, but it just shows how much you've actually done since 2012. So thank you so much for joining me.
Sure. Yes, sir. I'm so glad to be a part of this. Your podcast. I've seen a lot of great things that you're doing, and so for you to ask me to come on, it means a lot because I can't wait to learn more about you and also tell you a little bit about what I've got going on too.
Yeah, and of course we have a few people popping in, such as hey Julie and hey Rachel. So with everything going on in recent months, how are you handling this pandemic lockdown we've been all in?
You know, this time has really given me an opportunity to know what I need in my life, and what
Mm.
I need and I'm used to in my life is human connection, face-to-face human connection. So I'll be honest with you, the first couple of weeks weren't too good for me. It was difficult. I was in my apartment. I'm in my apartment now actually because the lighting is better than where I was. I was for this. I was with my parents,
Mm.
um, and that really helped out. Being around others, still social distancing, still sanitizing, being safe, and things like
Mhm.
that, and being mindful of wearing masks and where you're going and all that. But just and don't be wrong, I love living alone.
Mhm.
Um, I prefer that over living with somebody, but getting that connection. I was used to getting that connection out in the community, and then once the communities all across the world began to shut down, including my own here, I
Mm.
was thinking, "What am I gonna do?" So I'm doing a lot better now.
Mm.
Creative juices are flowing again. I've got a lot of things in the works that I'm working on, and so things are good. But so I feel for those who are living alone during this, being alone, staying alone, and I do as much as I can to encourage people to stay connected and to stay connected with my own people too. because it's important to stay connected the best way we can during these difficult times.
Yeah, that's something I've been fortunate enough to have, still being connected with all the people I've met since, especially last year with the competition. And I have to admit, early on, I also had problems because it just felt like just one thing after another and after another. And I'm keeping calm, but inside I was like, oh, come on, it's just.
Yeah. A lot of times,
Yep.
a lot of people's anxieties in life, including my own, and you could probably relate to this, come from
Mhm.
the unknown. And this whole pandemic has been nothing but unknown, wondering, what's going to happen next, and and how we can move on with our lives and things like that.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and speaking of, you know, dealing with stuff like this, for others it's just this and then it's back to normal. But for people with disabilities such as both of us, with me having Asperger's and syndrome, and you with cerebral palsy, we just have we already had to learn very early on how to be able to adapt to these sort of situations. So, s- for example, for me, some of the things that also come along with it is sometimes I do get anxiety
sure.
problems. So, and as for you, um, tell us about more about cerebral palsy and what were some of the challenges you faced growing up with it? Because I'm kind of curious.
Yeah,
Uh,
so cerebral palsy is a neuromuscular condition
mm,
that usually happens at or during birth. Mine
mhm,
happened um, during birth. I had a brain bleed, a grade 4 brain bleed, which is the
mm,
most severe, and I was in the hospital for a month in ICU. And um, so my mom always tells a story that the doctors said, hope and pray that he weighs a pound. Well, I weighed 3 pounds, and
mm,
and they really weren't sure how it was going to affect me, and things like that. Growing up, I had to do speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, but I've always considered myself, or especially now, growing up, I didn't really think about being, I was going to say grateful. Now I'm very grateful, but even growing up, I knew that it could be, my condition could be much more severe. And it's, cerebral palsy is non-progressive, but many people who have it in different forms, just
mhm,
as those with autism or Asperger's.
mhm.
You meet one person with autism or Asperger's, you just met one person, because everybody's a little bit different. Same with
Yeah,
cerebral palsy. So you can't really put us all in a box. Um, but growing up, I wanted to be just like everybody else, and
yeah,
that was a blessing and a curse. Um, because as I got older, I saw that there were things that were not as easy for me to do. Um, like playing sports, or I figured out how to do that, and we could talk about that if you want.
mhm,
But I'll never forget, in grade school, friends would always run up and down the bleachers,
mm,
just as kids do, and I couldn't get up and down the bleachers really,
mm,
that easily. And this was even when I was using crutches and things like that. So a lot of disappointment early on that really it was hard for me to deal with. Um, Never really faced any kind of mistreatment or
mm,
bullying or anything like that, except in one area.
mm,
Um, so that one area is, with my cerebral palsy, I have a startle reflex, and the startle reflex causes me to jump, a lot. So I
mm,
remember being in school, I would get upset. Um, because something would startle me and I would jump and someone would laugh and it would really bother me and things like that. So, but that wasn't really bullying. And I was just kind of, because it's honestly, it's kind of fun to see people jump. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
Um, so yeah, and I will tell you the story since I alluded to it, and we can
mm.
go back and talk about
Yeah.
anything else. But growing up, I did play basketball on a recreational team, a typical team. I was
Mm,
walked up and down the court the best I could, and kind of held one arm out for balance, and I'm left side dominant with my CP, so I would take the ball and shoot it. And they designed a play called the G-man play, which allowed me a free, uncontested shot at the basket. And I remember I made over, I think it was 11 points in a season. Not too many,
Nice.
no Michael Jordan numbers or Kobe Bryant numbers or anything like that. But, it was good to be on that team. And that was the first time I'd really gotten any kind of notoriety around town, because people always knew me for that G-man play, and people still know me from that. Just the other day, somebody commented about that on Facebook. So it's amazing what comes of things that we do, many years prior. I'm kind of curious to flip the question back to you. How was life growing up for you?
I've been on the rough side since, I was diagnosed around 5 or 6, which is actually around my earliest memory was around 6 in kindergarten. I can't remember anything before that, but it was just me adjusting to society. And for me, there were times where I do want to join the group, but it always felt like there was this mental barrier that prevents me from actually going up and simply asking, because it just felt like overwhelmed. And then it's just, and yeah, I actually was a pretty easy target for bullying, and it's just, and didn't always understand the social norms, which also got me in trouble. So it's just yeah, it was rough, but eventually I did graduate and leave high school, but I wasn't exactly the most happy camper, really, from it, especially since with high school, with my mother passing away and being the first of many deaths, going out of high school and into college, that I had to deal with, on top of me trying to just adjust to society the best I could. And it had me really depressed. I have to admit.
Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear that. I didn't know. And I'm sure that was tough. Death was tough for everybody. But did you find through school that you had at least a couple of good connections with friends and things like that, or
Yeah, I
or
still talk. Yeah,
different time?
some I reconnected through like Facebook and whatnot, and we don't exactly talk a ton, but it isn't. I may have painted a gloomy picture, but it wasn't like all doom and gloom all the time, because we tend to focus on the things that are very negative a lot of times, even throughout our whole lives. But there's always a little bit of a bright spot here and there, such as playground, just playing by myself, and just something like art classes I enjoyed. I always enjoyed sketching in my notebook while taking notes as well. So it's just,
Yeah,
the
you
thing
said
is,
art. Is that where you found that creative outlet that you have now? Did you start that at a really young age?
I was drawing long before I even, as long as I can remember, actually. And while kids were drawing stick figures in like first or second grade, I was just like drawing pieces of furniture or just from sight, and just, it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty decent for something that was just freehand drawing, instead of doing the usual, okay, draw these boxes and then start making the shape and whatnot. I wasn't very good at drawing people back then, but
I'm laughing because you said drawing people that were drawing stick figures.
yeah.
I'm still drawing stick figures now at 30 years old. So
Yeah,
I don't think my artistic ability in that regard has advanced too much.
well, the thing is, I wasn't very good at drawing people either, and in some respects, I still have a lot of improvement in terms of that. But
Yeah,
for
well,
me, I just kept I also kept judging myself of wanting to do realistic when I found out much, much later in life, and even now that I seem to be more into stylized, instead of 100% photorealistic kind of
Sure.
stuff. If I want photorealistic, that's why I have my camera for. So
Yeah, and so tell me a little bit about the your what you use that camera for. I know you do some photography, but
yeah, I actually own a business, Christopher Casson Photography LLC, which I started a long time ago. At first, thinking I was just going to sell nature and landscape prints because I like to cycle along the county roads, and then and then eventually I started experimenting with, what do I want to do with this? Because one thing I learned the hard way is you really should decide these things before you start a business. Get all the foundation down. But
I don't know.
eventually,
Come as they do. You
yeah,
don't have to have everything figured out.
yeah, and eventually it just led to me doing event photography. Since I just, it's almost like it's more like I'm in the backdrop instead of like forefront on stage. So for me, it was kind of more, in some ways, easier, but eventually, I do deal with sensory overload.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I do have to step back a bit and just, recharge. And that was also another difficult thing for me growing up. But eventually I did push myself to, how do I deal with this? How do I push myself a little bit? And well, here we are today, and here you are today,
Indeed.
because I know you definitely.
Indeed, yeah. It's all about pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone. That's what we've done. And
Yeah.
one thing, because I wanted to highlight from you, I looked on your website and we talked about this before offline, but something I want everybody to hear is something I found on your website that I really liked, and I wrote it down. So that's what I'm reading. It says, from hiding away from the world to learning everything the world has to offer. That's how you started with everything. And I just think that's such a great, thing to put out there, that, from, you hiding and me hiding from my disability and all of that, and then, now we want to learn everything and give back as well as we're doing. So I think it's just such a great transformation for everybody to understand,
Yeah,
and everybody goes through it in their own way.
yeah, and for me, it was just one decision that basically cascaded towards this. It was just that situation where I wanted to join these group of students for my college classes that were looking into creating a video game, and eventually I got to the point where I just went, okay, quit waiting for someone to save you, save yourself. And eventually I just pushed myself to just simply do something that felt like a Herculean task of just simply asking, hey, can I join? So it's just,
Hey, can you join? It's as
yeah,
simple as that. So how was
yeah.
that? How'd that feel for you to ask, can you join and be a part of this group?
It felt very empowering, and
Yeah.
just, yeah. And I know you definitely went through college as well with your degree in media studies. So
Mhm.
what led you to start with that?
So I went to college and got a degree in media studies, or wanted to get a degree in media studies because I wanted to be the next Ryan Seacrest or
Mm.
or
Eh?
Dick Clark or whatever, whatever generation you're from. No, I've always been interested in media. I've always connected so well to different forms of media and to music and things like that. So
Mm.
I had different ideas when I went in to get the media studies degree. At first, I was thinking about being a sportscaster. I was like, oh, that'd be pretty cool. But the thing is, I'm not the biggest sports fan.
Mm.
And I'm always curious to know everybody's sports preferences. I love watching sports, but I don't really have my only team. And I it was on the back wall because I'm used to being at my parents' house. But my only team is the North Carolina Tar Heels college basketball.
Mm.
All the rest, I mean, I enjoy watching football. I enjoy watching basketball, baseball, whatever, but I don't have teams. So I was like, I can't be a sportscaster.
Mm.
And then, so I was like, well, wait a minute, music. That's where I really connected. And I didn't start out, well, the first bands I liked were NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, things like
Yeah,
that.
they were popular back then, so.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. How old are you, by the way? Are we the same age?
I'm 34 currently.
Oh, okay. So did you listen to the boy bands or anything like that?
My
Britney
sister did.
Spears? I was hoping you would say you did too, just so I wouldn't feel so bad about it.
I wouldn't be surprised if some guys that did, really. I mean, come on.
Oh no,
So
plenty of people did. It was the way
then,
to go. It was the way to go back then.
yep,
But so I really got interested in. No, that's all right. You
yeah,
got a dog?
yep. He's just barking like mad at every single noise. So just continue. Go ahead.
No worries. What kind of, I love dogs. What kind of dog is it?
Toy poodle. I have allergies, so I'm a bit
Oh yeah.
restricted on what kind of breeds. So do you?
Oh yeah. My parents have a Maltipoo, and they love that thing more than anything in the whole world. So I get it. Poodles are great. So anyway, side
Anyway,
note, but you can always take time for dogs. I mean, so
yep.
yeah, I wouldn't be mad if your dog made a cameo in the live stream here. But anyway,
Yep.
so yeah, I was like, you know what? How can I? Because I knew I wanted to do media, and I knew like I wanted to be involved in some way, and so I so as you were talking about, getting the courage up to, as you were talking about getting the courage up to, go and talk to those gamer friends in the class,
Mhm.
I got up the courage myself while I was doing the media studies degree. I was very early on into it to go to the local radio station and talk to. Sorry, I just saw this. My mom's watching. Chris, what's up, buddy? Sorry, but anyway, so I went to the local radio station, WVRU at Radford University, and I went in there. I was like, I'd love to be, I'd love to work in radio or be on the radio. I had no idea what that meant, how to do it, never done it, and the operations director just he was like, okay, and so I did a little bit of interning and then learning the ropes. He taught me the ropes.
Mhm.
John Benfield, if you're watching or whatever, I appreciate that. And that gave me, an outlet, and I was on the radio every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. And I was just,
Mhm.
it was kind of free format, just playing whatever. Yeah, just playing any kind of music and things like that. Still remember the first song I ever played on the radio. Still didn't have a whole lot of confidence. So still didn't have a whole lot of confidence in myself as a person with a disability. Still didn't have confidence, on as how to talk about that, how to, make that into my persona or anything like that. So, that was still a very much a struggle. So I was kind of still hiding behind that. But at
Yeah.
least I was slowly finding my voice. And then I went on to work at a local radio station here in Roanoke to intern with them and do all that. But and which led me into Overcome Yours.
Mhm.
One of my things at the radio station, like I mean, when I was working in radio, like I don't know, I just saw like I began to see that I needed to share my own story and my own experiences. First, I needed to kind of get through some things, so I went to counseling, after college and stuff for a little bit of time. And I remember the counselor was like, "Oh, have you?" do you feel like you're accepting of your disability? And I'm like, what? Like, I never even thought about that really. So,
Mhm.
I never really thought about self-acceptance. I'm like, well, I've had this disability my whole life. I better be. But I got to really thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? I'm not. And so I went and I just, did a lot of soul searching, a lot of deep diving within myself, thinking, praying, whatever, just trying to figure out. And I was like, you know what? I really just need to accept what I can't change and change what I can't accept. Um, And so then that led me to my boss at the radio station at the time was saying, you should do speaking. And this was all during the time I was trying to figure out my own, self-acceptance and self-awareness and things like that, which is still a work in progress all the time for anybody.
Mhm.
And then he came up with the name Overcome Yours. And I was like, wow, and Kevin Scott, if you're taking a listen, that was the old program director at the radio station I worked at. But yeah, and so then I just got my first speaking engagement, and still worked in TV and radio, but got my first speaking engagement actually 6 years ago this month at a local Kiwanis club. I had no idea what I was going to speak about or what I was going to say or anything like that. And I was very nervous. I had no idea how I was going to be received. I had, and I tried to prepare, but I didn't have a website, social media, nothing. I just had a screen with a logo that said "Overcome Yours," the same logo I have now. And I just talked for 20 to 30 minutes, and I've been off to the races ever since. So, but tying everything back together, I want to tie everything back together, and then we can chat about whatever else. But the whole media thing, I'm still very enamored by media, still love it. So my way of getting back into media, just like you with your podcast, I too want to start my own podcast. And I know that you and I talked offline about that, but I definitely want to have you on as a guest on the podcast. So
Yeah, looking forward to it anytime. And I'm guessing you're gonna go with like Overcome Yours as the title, or is it still it's still in the concept stages?
Working title, but I'm thinking about the Overcome Yours hour. How's that? I mean, I'll ask you. Like, I mean, I've never said that to anybody, but how do you think that sounds like a good title for? You can be honest if you don't like it.
The Overcome Yours, what again?
The Overcome Yours hour, just like since it'd be an hour-long podcast. I don't know. That was kind of the working, and I'm not one to really, give away all my secrets or all the thoughts and things I'm thinking about creatively. But I wanted to give you that one,
for this podcast name, it took me a couple tries actually. So I just wrote down all the different ideas and asked other people, and eventually it did come to this name actually, and it was from someone that was in the competition last year, and it sounds like Matt here likes it. So
thanks, man. I appreciate you, buddy.
And Sarah saying hello.
Hey, what's up, Sarah? But yeah, so tell me about your competition. Tell everybody. I know you and I have kind of talked about
it. Yeah, last year I was in the competition called The Next Impactor, where basically people who want to make a difference in the world and be able to serve the people in whatever unique way they do, be able to basically compete each other, to outserve each other, so to speak. So I was kind of reluctant. I wasn't sure at first because, funny enough, you told your story of how you got the name Overcome Yours, because there was a similar situation for me actually with Autism to Autism, and it was from the co-creator of The Next Impactor, because I knew him offline around my area, and I was trying to figure out how to link the whole what I want to do with being able to go the entrepreneur route instead of struggling to find a job because of autistic traits and misunderstandings and whatnot. And just to show like a different way for autistics to be able to be successful in their own right, and especially with the unemployment rate being so high for autistics, that's just Geez. So I was talking to him about it, and he said, "How about you turn autism to autism?" And it was like lightning in the bottle, and I've been going with it ever since. So I've been going with that as in basically changing disability to ability. Instead of focusing on what we can't do, focus on what we can do.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. And his art, for those listening, Chris's art is pretty great. And I want Chris, I'm serious. This art behind me, this art means nothing to me. So I need something better on my wall. I'm looking at white walls all around me. I've got plenty of space. I need some artwork in this apartment.
Yeah,
So
well, I have one. We can discuss this at sometime
yeah,
afterwards, actually.
yeah, no
So,
doubt. Yeah. But I'm just
yeah,
trying to give um,
yeah,
your work there a plug too, and let people know how good it is. So,
yeah.
um,
Thank you. So,
yeah.
anyway, you started overcoming yours, and then you started, as we discussed before, you started collaborating with local, state, and national organizations to create that change.
Mm-hmm.
What's the process like on going through that to make those changes you want to see, and just more of about the journey of working with those who may not be as knowledgeable in areas where there needs to be improvements in the systems to help support people on who are considered disabled?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So, thing is for me, so I told you that I started speaking about 6 years ago. But it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I started, 3.5 years ago, that I started getting into any kind of advocacy. And really, the idea for me getting into advocacy was simple fact that I didn't know. I knew how disability affected me and my needs and what I can and can't do and this, that, and the other. And all of the supports I need. No paid supports at this point, but certainly natural supports, as we all in life have natural supports here and there. But so I knew what I needed, but I had no idea what other people with disabilities, regardless of disability or severity of disability, what the needs were. So for me, the advocacy started when I got connected to my local Center for Independent Living, which provides resources. And so it's not a place where people actually live, but it provides resources and supports for people to live independently within their own communities. So I was asked to join the board there. And then shortly after, I heard, I went to a interest meeting for those who may be interested in serving on any kind of state boards throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, not disability related at all. I mean, just anything. And so I filled out an application to be on a state board, and yeah, I was on that state board pretty quickly. And now I serve as chairman of the State Rehabilitation Council. And then got involved with Miss Wheelchair Virginia. I'm on the board of Miss Wheelchair Virginia. I have, let's see, what else have I? There's so many different things. I've been involved, Virginia Commonwealth University. I've been on certain committees. I wouldn't call them boards, but committees to. Oh, that's okay. That's all right. That's all right. I'll never be mad at a cameo by a pup. But yeah, so I've
Need to calm down.
Oh, look at that. See, now that's what I like. Forget me. Take me out of the whole picture.
No, you're the smartest.
No. What's the dog's name? We have
Spalding.
What?
Spalding.
Spalding? I love it. I love it.
He's adopted, so unfortunately was abandoned and was in the foster home, and we just found him online and adopted.
Good for you. I don't have any pets of my own right now, but if I do get pets, which I do want, I definitely would want to adopt. So good for you for adopting. But anyway, so been involved in various initiatives through VCU to improve healthcare and jobs and things like that for people with disabilities. But and also I was involved in Partners in Policy Making, which is a organization to just really for those parents and self-advocates to learn about those issues facing people with disabilities all across the board, from the history of the disability rights movement to issues facing which his disability rights movement started in the mid 60s, by the way, to the issues facing people with disabilities now. But one thing I was told throughout the advocacy process was to, because there's so many different ways you can advocate, so many different things you can advocate for, regardless of disability. I mean, like just in life, think about how many people might be trying to raise awareness for a certain cause or need or things like that. But the one thing I was told was to not start, but to focus mostly, if you want, on advocating for what affects you the most. So I thought, well, what affects me the most? Because I've never really struggled with employment. Any jobs I've ever gotten, which my jobs didn't start in radio and TV, by the way. I had other small jobs before that, or housing or school or anything like that. I've been very, very privileged and fortunate to be able to maneuver all those avenues on my own. But like what affects me most is as a person with mobility impairment who uses a mobility scooter is that the built environment, accessibility, curbs, ramps, storefronts not being accessible, stairs and things like that. So I really focus a lot on that now. Just working with local legislators and just doing different accessibility audits, especially in terms of the built environment. Just teaching people, what is accessible and what is not. And by no means am I an expert, but I am a person who has that experience and can provide some human, just human experience to that, and while working with people that have all the facts and figures and numbers, and I'm working to be one of those people too that has all the data in their head, just written down and things like that. But for now, it's just that letting people know and having that open discussion and dialogue, and and trying to see change made. But change doesn't come easy. Change doesn't come legislatively and structurally. It takes a long time.
It certainly does.
So.
Yeah, and that certainly speaks for me because I don't have direct experience, but my late mother did because she had post-polio and scoliosis, so she was always stuck in that electric scooter. So,
yeah, and what do you remember her talking about some of the barriers she faced, or some of the challenges she faced, or do you remember seeing it firsthand or anything?
it was. I'm trying to remember back because after I left high school, I wanted to forget everything, and memories a bit scared with that, but it wasn't as if it was unpleasant because we did have the giant ramp going out the house, and everyone in the neighborhood always likes to comment about. We did have a previous dog that unfortunately passed away, but he always sit on the base of the scooter, like between her feet, and just enjoying the ride, going down the neighborhood instead of just walking. He's just riding throughout the neighborhood.
Right on. And see, ramps like that make things so much easier, So yeah, and I always kind of keep that perspective too, that it was the people that came before us that made things much easier, regardless of what we're talking about, any form of advocacy and education, employment, accessibility, or whatever. So many people before us that paved the way. So my thought is you've got to keep, because there's always work to do. But people can advocate in a number of ways. So you don't always have to be talking to legislators or whatever. Because to be honest with you, because we're being honest with each other. So I do not like confrontation. I've never cared for confrontation. So for the idea of going to legislators and saying we need this now, that's not my strong suit. I can do it, but it's not my strong suit. I would prefer to just have peaceful conversation with people and try to get them to understand certain needs, but not in a there's Kobe right there. You see that? Not in a confrontation not in a confronting manner. So,
Hmm.
so yeah, it's a catch there, but yeah. So, but hey, you can, like I said, people can advocate in many ways. You advocate in many ways yourself. So advocacy doesn't
Yeah,
just
I'm
look like
still
one
working
thing.
on it. I'm a work in progress.
Yeah, right, man. You got so much going on, and just letting people know. Just talking about your autism is so huge because so many people with disabilities still don't talk about it, regardless of autism or not. But you know, um, since autism can affect how you perceive things socially, right?
Mhm.
That some people don't even know how to begin talking about it.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
sometimes that leads to something that the people that paved the way had to deal with,
sure.
discrimination, ableism, which is the term for like irrational hatred towards people who are disabled. So now we know we haven't, in terms of childhood, you haven't faced it, but have you faced it? Being an adult, or
Um, what the harassment or something or what?
just any kind of discrimination or whatnot.
No, I am comfortable enough in my own skin right now as I sit here, that
Mm,
anytime things may, you know, that things may be leading down that path, I know how to speak up now. Again, in a non-competitional manner. I never do like competition, but
yeah.
um, so no, I know. I think I have a pretty good handle on everything now.
Mm,
But still, plenty of people still face discrimination in the housing market. People with disabilities trying to get housing, employment.
mhm,
Um, even now amid this pandemic, so
yeah.
many people in need with disabilities can't get services and supports they need right now that they need so desperately every single day, regardless of pandemic. And so it's so important now. I mean, that's the most important piece of advocacy to work on now is making sure that those most in need are still getting served in some capacity, and especially even I've seen a lot of legislation and a lot of petitions going around for people with disabilities to have
Mm,
their supports in the hospitals now, and
mhm,
especially because of this pandemic,
yeah.
um, people with disabilities aren't ordinarily allowed to have people with them as other people aren't, and so
Mm,
but people with disabilities really need that support,
yeah.
and so it's very important now. What about you? Do you feel like you face discrimination or ableism or
Like I
anything like
said,
that?
it was more towards childhood, since the school, they haven't exactly dealt with someone on the autistic spectrum before, so of course there's going to be rough edges around with that.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I'm pretty certain I heard elsewhere that they have gotten much better though. So at least there's that. So
Yeah,
hopefully,
I think over time, and again, just people, raising their voice and advocating,
yeah.
things get better. I am curious to know about, I mentioned a little bit about my employment experience, but you said that it's often hard for people with autism to get jobs, which it certainly is. Like, what was your experience with employment before you started your own entrepreneurial efforts?
For me, it was struggling to get employment because I was already just down the pits with the confidence level and just wondering, why do I keep going? It's just, what's the point? And it just felt like I was just going on the rails, and well, it wasn't exactly the brightest moment of my life with,
Sure,
being deep in what I considered depression. I never actually gotten the diagnosis because I just didn't want to end up, being pouring down pills down my throat. You know what I mean? But
sure,
but
yeah,
eventually, I don't know. It just felt like, looking back, that I always wanted to go the entrepreneurial route, but I didn't exactly have the full support that I would have liked, and that goes into a completely different issue. But even with me getting a degree in computer animation, wanting to do video games, I didn't want to be just stuck in an office just creating games at a big comfy corporate seat. I just wanted to be able to create my own vision as a way for me to speak out, speak through visuals.
Sure.
And that's kind of the thing I had on my website as well. Is my first language is art. My second language is English. So
I saw that.
for me, it's just more easier to speak through being able to get what I want to say through drawing sometimes, rather than trying to figure out, okay, what's the right word to say.
Sure. Yeah. Many people learn in many different ways. For me in college, if I didn't have a notepad and a pen with me, I might as well not even be in class because I had to write things down. I mean, I could remember something. I mean, I could remember, I was very fortunate. I could, remember a lot, but details of certain things, if I didn't write things down, just go in one ear and out the other. So I get that. But yeah, but
So
you can go. You can, if you have something else you wanted to ask, but there's stuff I wanted to ask you as well. But
yeah. So outside of your advocacy, there we go again. So outside of your advocacy efforts, you also work as you mentioned, support and community engagement coach for adults with disabilities through a local nonprofit. So tell us a little bit more in depth about that, if you would, and what are the issues for those with disabilities facing that you find to be more common than they should?
Well, you know what? I mean, people with disabilities, regardless of what it is, really just want a sense of community, a sense of acceptance, belonging, and social connection. So that's what I find with so many people, including myself. There have been, like I told you, I mean, this this pandemic made me kind of out of sorts for a few weeks because I didn't have normal social interactions that I used to have, going to the gym or meeting a friend for lunch or in my day job or in my advocacy work or whatever. So every human being needs that sense of community, and it doesn't stop with people with disabilities. And so people with disabilities, often, as you well know, don't always know how to go about building that community. And so, through the community engagement work that I do with clients, it is trying to help them, navigate their world and build their own community friendships and relationships with one another, and just through shared interest and common interest and things like that. But as I've already talked about with my advocacy, I still see that that there are struggles in many different areas. But and that really came that opportunity really came just out of my advocacy in and of itself, and I'm very grateful for it because it gave me that although the opportunity came to me, it gives me an opportunity to really, interact, not just, on paper and say, well, these people with disabilities need this, and not just think about facts and figures, but really interact face to face in group settings, one-on-one, over the phone now Zoom and things like that, but with individuals, and really understand people more. And I feel like it's really given me, a lot more understanding of just humanality and
Human element.
the human element of life and what we all want. And really, when you strip it away, what we all want in life is very much the same. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just that sense of community, that sense of productivity and progress within life, achieving goals and relationships and everything else. Everything else is really secondary. And I think that's what this pandemic is teaching so many people is that look at all these things that have been, temporarily stripped away from us,
Hmm.
our abilities to go and live our lives the same way, but still the core things can remain. And thankfully, with computers and cell phones and things like that, we can still stay connected. And it's so important for everybody to stay connected virtually or however you can do that
Yeah.
at a time like this. So it's really all the same. We're really a lot more similar than we are different.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Because we all just want to have that sense of purpose, We
Yes,
all want
indeed.
we all want to have that feeling of we have a reason for being, and when you kind of strip that away, it's just what's the point? Because that's what I was sort of feeling going through college. I was just going through the rounds of what I'm supposed to do,
Sure.
and it's just
And do you feel like this outlet? I mean, I certainly feel like for you, this outlet is that. But do you feel like this your own creative outlets is that for you?
yeah, it definitely is. It's just I'm not sure where I would be if it weren't for me not only just making that single decision, but just having people accept me, Just
Yeah,
accept me freely and not seeing how awkward I am or, my autistic traits, just see me as me.
yeah. But you know what? Nobody's really awkward. Everybody's unique. Everybody has their own traits and characteristics um, that make them unique. So
Mhm.
by no means are you awkward. You have your own podcast. You've
Well
got a lot
well, I'm
going on.
considered awkward
You know,
to other people with their own standards. So,
yeah, no, I get it. And that's the thing. Society standards are, they need to change. They need to understand that everybody learns and connects differently and things like that. And so we need to get past the point where we look at someone who may be different, regardless of their disability or their wealth or their knowledge or whatever, and think of them as less because they don't possess the same exact ideals and skills that society says we need. So
yeah.
um,
And just this
so
and
I
also
feel like
just
this is the way to do it.
oh, yeah, and just this resistance to change as well, because some are just so stuck in the old ways, and that's because their own fear of that unknown factor. But it comes
Yeah,
as a detriment to everyone else that's really just wanting to be a part of this world.
yeah, yes, indeed,
Mhm.
yes, indeed. Yeah,
So anyway, one of the other things you've done outside of advocacy efforts is uh, this thing called Big Brothers Big Sisters program. Could you tell us more about that and what drew you to it?
yeah. So Big Brothers Big Sisters. Are you familiar with Big Brothers Big Sisters America? And do you know what the program does at all?
No, this is the first time I've actually heard of it. So,
Okay. Well, so Big Brothers Big Sisters is just a program where you you're matched with a little brother,
mhm,
or if you're a female, matched with a little sister or whatever. And it's just you're there to mentor someone in need.
mm,
A lot of times they may have, they may, you know, not have come from let's see how to say this right. I mean, I don't want to say come from a rough background, but they just, may not have the same privileges that
or
other
or
typical
opportunities.
opportunity. There you go. There you go. So you're helping me out. I don't know how to say it, but yeah. So they may not have the same opportunities as everyone else. So you just kind of serve as a mentor, and I got involved in that a couple of years ago. Once I moved to where I am now, more centrally located downtown, the office of Big Brothers Big Sisters
Mhm,
is downtown and or near where I live, and so I went to a networking event. I think the networking event I think it was right below my apartment. There was a restaurant right below my apartment, and I think the event was right down there. And so I just signed up. I wanted to and that's taught me a lot too. Just helping, just helping kids, and you're matched with one little brother or little sister, but I did a program where on a weekly basis was interacting and mentoring in some capacity, a number of kids. So that's been a great, rewarding experience too, and I've learned just as much from them, hopefully, as they have from me. So that's a great thing to do, to give back.
Yeah, nice, awesome. Because one of the nonprofits I recently discovered, thanks to the competition last year, was Madison House Autism Foundation. Because one of the big issues, especially with parents of with the kids on the autistic spectrum, is what exactly is going to happen to them once they pass away. Because are they just
Sure.
going to be put in an institution and be forgotten, or are they just going to end up homeless? And like, what's going to happen? And that's something every parent worries about. So one of the main programs they have is housing for them, so that they have a safe place to stay, for especially for those that are on the more severe end of on the autistic spectrum. So
Yeah.
just it's just really nice to know that there's a nonprofit that aligns with what I want to help solve, and somehow contribute it in my own way.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so great, and that's really just what it's about, getting out there and seeing what opportunities to help and get involved in community, are, and so that sounds like, and that is very much needed, for not only people with autism, but anybody with disabilities, when you do have those needs, thinking about what's going to happen as they age, it is something to consider. So that sounds like a great initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'd be remiss. I don't know how many more questions you have for me, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your travels.
Oh,
I want to know, and I want everybody to know, at least to some degree, about your travels. Um,
yeah. First, it started off with me just traveling to a cafe in the noisy environment. So it's just me slowly getting out my own shell from just staying indoors all the time, except for maybe like a family trip or a trip to the restaurant. But otherwise, I just stayed inside all the time, like stayed in my room, and then eventually I just just eventually pushed myself, because part of it was that I started having coffee as a favorite. So of course, uh, caffeine, gotta have it, and eventually it just started
no
pushing myself
doubt.
towards.
I would survive. Okay.
Eventually, it started pushing myself from starting cycling around the county roads. Because before that, I had to go through multiple surgeries that left me being unable to actually move around or walk a lot without accidentally opening a new wound. So for me, that felt very liberating, just being able to do something that we tend to take for granted, which is just simply walking. And then
Sure.
eventually it moved on from there, from me driving all the way to the shores of Lake Michigan and back, like an hour drive, and then just kept going further and further, and eventually it dramatically went from that to doing, like, trying out events, like being an assistant at weddings, taking photography there to get used to the noise, and then took a big trip all the way to the East Coast, to the Carolinas, and just being able to step into
What,
the Atlantic Ocean for the very first time
what
instead of
part of I have to know?
it was South Carolina,
Oh,
um,
South.
in Charleston, the Charleston area.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I went
Sure, sure.
to I went to Sullivan's Island, step in the ocean for the first time, and it was just this feeling that I guess some would like to call it magical, or but it just drove my want and need to travel more and more. So eventually, that I actually traveled along with a friend and stayed at their home during the trip. But eventually, I also ended up taking a solo trip all the way out to the Rocky Mountains by myself for the first time without anyone else, despite being on the autistic spectrum, and what you may think of, oh, what's going to happen if they suddenly have an anxiety in the middle of a busy highway or whatnot. And I managed it because I take breaks when needed, and just sat somewhat quiet, and eventually just made it all the way over there, even though some Nebraskans might have an issue with it. But it was kind of a chore going through Nebraska, just seeing field after field after field after flat field. But yeah, and I just love the mountains, and just being able to hike all the way to the summit, and just being able to see the world at such a high point, and just seeing not only how small we are, but just how small my problems are in the grand scheme of things. Just being able to look out.
Dude, I love that. I love that. I love that. Sorry, there was some noise outside in the hall. I hope you didn't hear that. I don't know what it was, but it sounded like a robot or something. I don't know. But no, wait. So did you go to Colorado?
Yeah.
Is that where you ended up?
Yeah, I actually took an Airbnb actually. So, and just ordered the Airbnb myself, did my own research, all the research by myself, just handled everything. And again, it was just another good experience for me moving forward. And eventually again, an old friend of mine from way back, all the way from second grade, actually, when I first met him, he decided to go all the way to Southeast Asia and take me along with him at a time when I was wondering how am I going to be able to visit, Angkor Wat, and I ended up going there. So it's just.
How was that? How was that culturally? Like, I mean, you can answer that however you want. I'm just totally curious because I haven't
That's
been
a
that
whole
far.
episode in and of itself, because it's definitely different. Over here in America, it always feels a bit more tense, while over there it's a lot more laid back,
Yeah.
really, in comparison. But they also deal with their own issues, such as poverty and whatnot, and I definitely saw that on top of that. And they definitely don't have nearly the amount of accessibility for, like, say, someone that's in like a wheelchair, because they don't really have much in the way of sidewalks, really. Because at times I felt like I end up walking on the road, actually. So,
Yeah.
but it's definitely
And
quite an experience, especially going through Cambodia and then Thailand, and just seeing a different perspective, of how good we actually have it here in America in comparison to other countries.
no doubt. How long were you over there?
A little over a month.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
It's really cool.
yeah. I definitely would like to eventually travel to different other areas like Nepal, and just being able to see the Himalayas, and just keep continuing the. But first and foremost, I need to master, the business side of things, the entrepreneurship side of things, which is part of what I got me started doing all this in the first place.
Sure.
Mm.
Sure.
So we
Yeah,
actually.
and that's an ongoing. Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
Oh,
Mhm.
no, but that's mastering entrepreneurship. That's an ongoing process in and of itself, always ever changing. And some days with entrepreneurship, you're up. You're like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
doing great. And then some days it's like, I'm not even doing what I need to be doing. Why am I
Yeah,
even doing this?
you keep doing
What
this,
am I doing?
and
And some days you're
eventually.
just kind of like, so,
Yeah, the one thing
yeah,
I've been learning.
but
Yeah, yeah, the one thing I've been learning since last year is that we're so much on the whole up and down, but what we need to do is like make incremental steps upward. That's how we should be running our businesses. But a lot of times,
yeah.
well, again, that's a whole different topic on itself, which.
Yeah, but
Um,
I totally agree, because that's something that I've struggled with too in terms of just like struggled with perfectionism, like wanting everything to be perfect before I take one step or this or that and the other, metaphorically speaking with a business. And it's like, yeah, to some degree, you need to have things in order, but sometimes you just got to take a little step and see where it leads,
Yep.
and,
Take
and
the
make
leap
some
of faith.
progress. And that what
The leap of faith.
and yeah, leap of faith. That's right. And and that little bit of progress and productivity will really push you further to think, well, man, that wasn't so bad. Maybe I'll do a little bit more here, this, and the other, regardless of what it is. Um, just so I'm really trying now to not focus so much on having everything perfect,
Mhm.
because I'm thinking that if I keep working at it, if I do a speaking engagement and I'm like, oh, I don't really like what I said there, or if I put out some video content or just whatever, any kind of content or speaking or any kind of advocacy work, and it's not perfect, then I can look at it and try to find ways to tweak it and grow from it. And then the goal would be to look at it 6 months down the road and be like, wow, I've really improved on that. So
Mhm.
not trying to make improvement, with the snap of a finger. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
and that's how we eventually overcome ours, both of us.
that's it. That's
Yep.
it. That's it. But again, overcoming is an ongoing process. So
Come on.
yeah,
Well, that's the thing with this dog. He always wants someone within eyesight in order to drink water. It's
oh yeah,
odd. But anyway, we're already kind of going over, but this has been a great conversation, and I want to thank you definitely for your time. So
yeah. I mean, you got it.
one one of the last things I wanted to ask you is, what would be your biggest advice for someone who has disabilities that wants to follow a similar path as yours and wants to see and create the change?
You know what? I've kind of alluded to this already, but I think it just starts with self acceptance. If
Mhm.
you accept yourself and then figure out what your strengths are and don't necessarily worry about your weaknesses. Figure out what lights your fire, so to speak, and makes you feel good in terms of advocacy and speaking and things like that. It could be podcasting, it could be different artistic expression or blogging. I mean, a lot of people are into blogging. I need to get more into that myself, but um, however that feels to you, figure that out.
Mhm.
And don't feel like you've got to tackle everything. Don't feel like you've got to do it all, because that you can run yourself ragged, so to speak, and kind of get yourself down and out, thinking you're doing too much. But
Mhm.
so just figure out what makes you feel the best, and go for it. And don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid to go back on certain things. You know, and change up how you do things. So yeah, but it really starts with self acceptance for me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely the perfect way to end this. So
Yeah.
again, thank you so much. And I just wanted to ask, how can they contact you?
Well, overcomeyours.com. My website needs a lot of work. I've seen yours. I might get you to help me
Uh,
update mine.
actually, I use Squarespace.
Oh, you do? Yeah, I have a web hosting guy, but and he's good, but I want something a little more user friendly for me to be able to do too. So yeah, you can
Squarespace, yeah.
contact. Yeah,
Squarespace definitely is that simple drag and drop.
yeah, cool. Yeah, I may get into that. But yeah, overcomeyours.com on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at overcomeyours. My email is Garrett, Garrett at overcomeyours.com. Um, yeah, you can Facebook me or whatever, however you want to. You can message me. I'm not unreachable, but yeah. But Chris, thanks so much, man. This is a great conversation. I feel like we could keep this going for 2 hours or more. So
Well,
so we're gonna continue.
we're actually going 10 minutes over the hour, actually. So it's just
Sorry, dude.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's
Well, look,
no
when
problem.
I my podcast,
It's fun.
I want to continue this conversation because I
Yeah,
feel like we could certainly cover more ground. And, and you've inspired me to further work more on my own podcast, and
good.
some of my own other efforts. So I appreciate that. So that then, whenever that comes, we can continue. But thank you so much. I wish you all the best with everything you're
Yep.
doing, with the podcast and everything. So
Yeah,
thanks so much, man.
thank you so much for joining me. And for those wondering, it's the podcast is actually part of my personal website, christophercaston.com/podcast. And we're also available on um, Facebook, Instagram with Thru Autistic Eyes Official, as well as a Patreon, so that if you like this content and would like to give you support so that this can continue, there's the different tiered options for you to do so. So, and every little bit helps. So, thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you so much, Garrett, for joining me, and hope to see you guys again for next month, since next month is basically all about growth, especially after everything with the pandemic going on and people wondering where do we go from here. So this is a topic that I definitely want to cover, and I'm pretty certain you guys are gonna love the guests coming up. So thank you so much, guys, and see you all next week. So take care. Oh, and
Thanks, pal.
also, yep, and also this podcast is also available on the major platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whichever is your preferred platform. So again, take care.